Kenda, you talk a lot about movement in your lecture. Can you say a little bit more about movement and youth's desire to be moved?
Well, yeah, I think that that's a big part of the conversation about transcendence and awe, because part of it is that we intuit that we want young people to have a moving experience. We know that they are active. We know that we need to do active learning, in part because young people are wired for movement. Even Erik Erikson talked about, in the 1960s, talked about young people's need to be moved, their need for locomotion. So part of that is in their developmental makeup. Part of it is in their neurological being. We know that part of the human desire for movement and ecstasy even is built in neurologically. We talked about the origin of the word ecstasy means to stand beside. We're beside ourselves, right? When we have this ecstatic experience. And that is wired in ways that we are learning have to do with our biological makeup, where we are learning more about the mind-gut connection. Even certain moods and so on have to do with microbes that affect the wiring in our brains, and our emotional makeup. Daniel Siegel talks about the integrating role of emotions that actually predispose us to not just feel that we've been moved, but that get us ready to physically move. That's part of what predisposes us. It overrides other systems so that we can actually get up and go. So there's this deep connection to in our minds and our bodies, the way emotion functions with us. So that anybody who works with teenagers knows that it's not just a head trip. We've got to somehow connect to them in ways that tap into this emotional makeup. Now, what happens, of course, is that we kind of jump the shark on that, and we go all the way into manufacturing these emotions. And one of the places that youth leaders recoil is, oh my gosh, I don't want to have to manufacture a fake emotional response, because we don't want them to confuse their emotional highs with God. So there's a real allergy in some ways to emotional experience. If you have done a lot of youth ministers get really sick of that really quick. But at the same time, we don't want to not have these transcendent experiences in youth ministry, because they're honest and they're part of the way young people do apprehend the holy. So there's this tension, right, between, okay, we don't want to manufacture religious experience, because after all, we don't control what God is doing, and we don't want young people to misunderstand or confuse their emotional experience with divine experience. But at the same time, God does use human bodies. God does use human experience. God does use these holy moments as part of the way Christian tradition, appropriates what we understand to be holy. So what do we do with that? So one of the things we were trying to clarify was, look, we can catechize people within an inch of their lives, but there's nothing really that we're going to do that will actually move young people closer to God. But what we can do is open young people to recognizing that God has moved towards them already in Jesus Christ, and open them to understanding the Spirit's movement towards them now. Those are embedded in the practices of Christian tradition. So practices like prayer, practices like pilgrimage, practices like even worship, these are practices that open us to recognizing God's movement towards us, but they don't move us closer to God. That's that would be manufacturing kind of movement. So,
thank you.